I'm Anastasia Chatzka. I'm a fashion designer, pattern maker, and sewing educator, and I'm so happy you're here sewing along with me today. Welcome to Sew Anastasia, and today we are doing another upcycling project requested by all of you. You love upcycling. So we are gonna take this blazer and we are gonna turn it into a skirt. Yes, you heard me right. We are gonna turn this blazer into a skirt. Skirts that look like the front of the blazer are a raging trend right now. So we are gonna create one by upcycling this blazer into a skirt. And we're gonna make it a mini skirt because mini skirts are all the rage right now too. But if you're doing this project at home, you obviously can make the skirt any length you would like. If you're not already a subscriber to Sew Anastasia, make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when all the new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for following along. And don't forget, I now teach sewing classes in my design studio in Chicago, Illinois, and I teach them virtually as well. So check those out at sewanastasia.com. Supplies for this project are super simple. They're basically everything you already have in your sewing basket, your scissors, your pins, your rulers, your thread, all that good stuff. But there is one thing that you might not have on hand, and that's gonna be single fold bias tape. So if you don't have any of this, you can buy it at the store or you can create your own. You can totally cut your own bias tape. If you don't know how to do that, make sure you check out my video on how to do that. So once you have your bias tape, let's get started and turn this blazer into a skirt. So the jacket I have here, I thrifted, and I just love the fabric on this jacket. I love the black background with the pink and the red, the fuchsia. It is everything. Now I could buy some fabric at the store, but I don't think I'm gonna find this awesome fabric at the store because this is a vintage 90s sport coat and I am in love with the fabric. So we are gonna upcycle it into a skirt. The first thing you need to do is figure out how long do you want your skirt and where do you want it to start on your body. So I like my things high-waisted, so I'm gonna be having it at my waist and then go down to the tip of my fingers. So I'm going to be putting a tape measure from my waist. I'm gonna put my hands at my side and then grab the tape measure, and we are at 17. So I'm going to be making my skirt 17 inches long. So write down that number so you don't forget it, your own measurement, of course. And let's find out where 17 inches is from the bottom up on the blazer. Okay, so if we take the tape measure and put it from the bottom of the coat up, we see that 17 inches is right here. Now, I'm feeling like that looks a little long, so I actually might make it 15 or 16 inches. So I think I'm gonna try this blazer on the bottom of me and just see where the bottom of it comes up to my waist. So I really feel like 17 inches is kind of long here. It looks like a lot of fabric for a skirt. So I'm gonna double check my measurements for my length, and then we are gonna chop up this blazer. Don't ever be afraid to measure a few times. Because we're upcycling a garment, we only get one chance to cut it. So measure, measure, measure again, and then cut. And don't forget to add ½ inch seam allowance to the top of your waist for a bias facing. So I double checked my measurement and I am going to be cutting at 16 inches. So now we're going to cut our coat up, so let's do it. Okay, so I'm measuring from the very bottom of my coat up. Now 16 inches is right here at this plaid line. Now the nice thing about working with plaids is that you can just follow that line all the way across. But if you don't have a plaid, make sure you're measuring from the bottom up and marking with chalk exactly where you need to cut. So me, I can just start cutting on into it. Okay, it's always nerve-wracking to cut into something because there is no going back. So when I'm doing this, I'm cutting through all the layers. We're just going to work our way around this coat. We're gonna end up with a little bolero when we're done, it looks like. I just love this fabric. It is gorgeous. Okay, now we have got the bottom of our skirt. Now that we have this cut to length, we need to fit it. So we're gonna put it on the dress form and tailor it up. And if you don't have a dress form, no worries. You can totally put it on yourself and pin up the excess. So I have this skirt on the dress form, that's my size, so I can tailor it up. And I've put a pin at center front and I've put one at center back. And now we can see all this extra fabric that we need to tailor up. So I'm going to take in the sides of this jacket. We might even need to put a little dart back here, it looks like. So we want to keep our plaid nice and straight. So I'm gonna put another pin at the side seam, putting my pin horizontally, and then it's going to divide out this excess fabric, keeping the garment balanced. So it's really important when you're upcycling to still keep your garment balanced so that way it's going to fit you properly. So we've got all this excess here. So it looks like we are gonna pin this into a dart. You could also just make it a pleat as well, but I would like this to be a fitted skirt, so I'm going to make this a dart. I'm also gonna pin all the way down center back here so that this excess doesn't move on me. Now, if you're doing this on yourself, I know you're not gonna be able to pin in the center back, but you can always wear something under your garment. That way you can pin into it like that. Okay, let's try and make these even. I think I'm gonna pull this one over just a little bit. Looks like we have more excess on the side for some reason, but we have a seam right here. So I'm actually going to be taking some out of this seam right here as well. Okay, so we got this back side fitted up. Let's check out the other side. Interestingly enough, this one is laying pretty flat. Where's that seam? There it is. So we are gonna leave that. So we'll just end up taking in that seam and then putting in these two darts. And now the front, we wanna take a look at this. We got our pockets down here. We've got a seam here in the jacket, so I'm going to pin right where that seam is to take it in to create shape. Okay, we've got that side taken in. And now we're gonna work our way over here to this side. So there's our seam, and we are going to pin up that seam. Okay, so our skirt is looking much more fitted. We're going to end up taking it in the sides right here. I'm gonna turn this around. We're also gonna end up putting in some darts here and also just taking it in right here on the side. Why is it like that? I don't know. This garment was pre-worn, so it probably just got stretched out of shape. So we're just gonna end up taking it in on this one side right here and not on the other side. For the next step, we need to tailor up all these intakes that we just created with the pins. So we have some that we're going to be intaking where there's already an existing seam, and then we also have some darts to add. I'm gonna go over how to handle both of these methods while upcycling this into a skirt. First, I'm gonna show you how to take in the seam on this skirt. So I wanna measure how long the intake is and then how wide it is up at the top. So it looks like it's 6 inches long and the intake at the top starts at 1 inch. So I'm going to unpin this and now I'm going to flip the project inside out. Okay, so this is our seam right here. And now what I need to do is draw that exact same intake on the inside of this jacket. So first what I'm gonna do is measure down 6 inches. So I know this is where it needs to end and blend into the project. And I'm going to come 1 inch over from the seam, not the edge of the fabric. So we're coming over 1 inch from the seam. And we're blending right back into the seam that's already there. Okay, so now you can see exactly where I need to sew. And we're gonna take it in the same amount on the other side, so you can go ahead and mark your other side as well. I also have 2 other seams on the back of my skirt that I need to take in, so I'm also gonna mark those up so I can just go to the sewing machine and sew everything up at the same time. Now, depending on the jacket that you're turning into a skirt, you could have more seams, you could have less seams, so right now is a great time to just take in all of your seams. Now that I have them all marked, let's go sew them up. I have my machine set to a straight stitch and I'm gonna follow those chalk lines that I just put on the fabric. Make sure you're back stitching or fixing and work your way smoothly all the way down the fabric. And make sure when you get to that seam that you're actually sewing into that existing seam a little bit beyond and then back stitch and cut. So you can see where I took in both of these seams here, and it's so important that you blend back into that existing seam. And if you don't, you're gonna end up with a weird bubble or pucker on the other side. And if that happens to you, just make sure you're blending right back into that existing seam that's already there in the jacket. Now that we've taken in those existing seams, grab your scissors and we're gonna cut off the extra. Make sure you're leaving a 1/2 inch seam allowance or at least a 1/4 inch, depending on how much you had to take it in. So just work your way all the way down, that amount you cut, and then there we go. We've got our new seam, we've got our seam allowance, and we're good. So now we're just gonna do that to the littler one that we had on this side as well. There we go. And now we just need to do it to the rest of our seams where we took it in. Now that we have all of the excess chopped off the seams, it's time to sew up the darts. Now let's go over measuring our darts and marking them and making sure they're balanced to center back. So you can see that when I pin my darts on the dress form, they're different distances from center back, but I want them to be the same distance from center back. So I'm going to choose this dart to replicate. So I'm gonna measure from center back over to the pin, and it's 1.5 inches. So I know that my dart has to start 1.5 inches over, and now we need to measure how big it is. So it is 1 inch wide at the top, and then it's going to be about 6 inches long. So now I know that I can flip it inside out and replicate this dart here. So my dart was 1.5 inches over from center back, so I'm gonna put a mark there. And then it was 1 inch wide when it was folded in half, which means that's a 2-inch dart. So we're gonna go ahead and put a mark at 2 inches. And now I also need to draw down 6 inches into the center. So we're gonna draw down 6 inches in the center of what would be the dart. And now we're gonna take the point of the dart and blend it up to that 1-inch mark on this side. And then we're gonna blend it up to the 1-inch mark on the other side. So that way you can see exactly what the dart is gonna look like when we sew it up. It's 2 inches wide and 6 inches long. And now you're gonna mark the same dart on the other side. Now that we have the darts all marked, let's go sew them up. And if you need points on sewing darts, haha, not literally the point of the dart, but if you need some tips on sewing darts, make sure you check out my videos on sewing darts. There'll be a link up here and down below. So I've folded my dart in half. I'm gonna start at the top. I'm gonna make sure I'm fixing or back stitching. We're gonna work our way all the way down and make sure you're coming completely off the fabric so you don't have any bubbles at the end of your dart. And you get to the end, back stitch, and cut. And we're gonna do the same thing to the other side. Now that you have your darts sewn up, they should look something like that. Since this fabric's really thick, I'm gonna cut off a lot of the dart intake, which is totally fine because we have a seam there and we're just basically leaving a seam allowance and cutting off everything after that. There we go, we cut off at least 1 inch of fabric and it's gonna lay so much flatter at the waist since we got rid of that. So we're gonna do the same thing to the other one. There we go. So if you had a lining in your jacket, you're gonna need to take in the exact same amount on your lining that you did on the outside of your skirt. So that way the waist of the lining and the skirt are going to line up really nice. So let's say you put 4 darts in your skirt and you took in a few seams. You need to do the exact same thing to the lining because we want the lining to also fit the outside of the skirt perfectly. You're gonna use the same measurements you used for the outside of the skirt for the lining. So just go ahead and do the exact same thing and then we'll move on. And if you don't have a lining, well, it's your lucky day. You don't have to do anything right now. So I also took in the lining and now we are all taken in. All we need to do is finish the waist and put that bias facing on it. Oh, and we gotta put some buttonholes on the front so that way it stays on. So let's take a look at it. So you can see that we took in the inside of the skirt on the lining and on the self fabric. Now what we need to do is give this a really good press while we have it open here. So just press everything open, or you could press it to one side depending on what kind of fabric you have. And then what we're gonna do is baste these 2 layers together so they don't move on us when we attach our bias facing. So I went ahead and I put a basting stitch in. So both of our layers are sewn together now, and that means it's prepped and ready to sew on the bias facing. So you can see we have our stitch in here and we have both of our layers together. And since my next stitch is gonna be a 1/2 inch, I just made sure that this stitch was within the 1/2 inch. I also have my bias facing prepped. So mine is pretty wide, it's 2.5 inches, and then I folded one edge over a 1/2 inch and one edge up 1/4 of an inch. Now you can make your bias facing as wide or as narrow as you like, but I thought doing something about 2 inches would look really nice and be sturdy to hold the waist in place through wear. So you're gonna place your skirt right side face up, and then you're gonna take the right side of your binding and place it right side on the skirt. Now you want the edge that has the 1/2 inch fold in it, and you're gonna unfold it, and you're gonna line up the raw edge of the binding with the raw edge of the skirt. Now you wanna leave about 1 inch hanging off the edge so that way we can go back and finish it up later. So go ahead, unfold your binding and pin it down all the way around. Okay, so now that we have this pinned down, we are going to sew in that 1/2 inch crease that we have here all the way across the waist. And then what we're gonna do is take it and we're gonna flip it up, and then we're going to give it a nice little edge stitch right on the facing, making sure that you're catching the seam allowance of the skirt in that. And then what we're gonna do is flip it down to the inside, and then we're going to stitch it down at the very edge. You could use a blind hem stitch, or you could just use a regular stitch, but keep in mind if you use a regular stitch, you will see it on the outside of your garment. Let's go sew that bias facing on. Don't forget to back stitch at the beginning. And just follow that 1/2 inch crease that you have there. When you get to the end, go all the way off the fabric and back stitch and cut. Okay, now we're gonna do the edge stitch. Make sure you're back stitching or fixing, and just work your way all the way down the waistband. Don't forget your edge stitch is about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. When you get to the very end, back stitch and cut. Now what we need to do is flip our facing to the inside, but we have this raw edge here. So what we're gonna do is fold it in, and then we are going to flip it down. You could pin this if you like, or you could just hold it in place. And now what we need to do is sew down here at the other end. We're gonna sew, again, about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Make sure you're back stitching or fixing. And then as you do this, just make sure everything stays nice and flat. When you get to the other end, make sure you're folding that edge under. Come all the way over to the edge, leave your needle in, lift your foot up, and let's turn and sew up the piece of binding. This is really thick. My fabric was really thick, so I'm just going really slow. Make sure I don't break a needle. Okay, we're going to back stitch and cut. I'm also going to go back to where I started in the beginning and just close up the edge of the binding on this side as well. I hate needles breaking. Cut, and we're done with the waistband. The waist of our skirt is looking beautiful and professional. Let's take a look at it. The waist of our skirt is looking beautiful and finished. Our ends look really nice. And then that stitch that we put at the bottom of the facing, you can barely see it through this fabric, which is great. It looks really nice and clean. And then if we flip it up, you can see our bias facing. You might be wondering, why did she use light pink? Well, that's all I had laying around, so that's what I used. And nobody's gonna see it anyways. It's on the inside. So we have one last step to complete this skirt. We need to put 2 more buttons and 2 more buttonholes down the front of the skirt. So I took the buttons off of the sleeve of the jacket, and we are gonna use these 2 buttons down the front of the skirt. And the skirt already had 1 button in it because it was a blazer, so it already had a button there. So we're just going to use the other 2 buttons to close up this skirt, and then we get to try it on. So I have my buttons laid out where I would like them, and they're 3.5 inches apart from center to center. You can make yours closer, you can make yours further apart, whatever you'd like. And I'm gonna follow the buttonhole that's already here and do horizontal buttonholes. So I've marked on both sides of my buttons, so that way I know exactly where I need to make my buttonhole. So I'm gonna be sewing a horizontal buttonhole from this chalk line to that chalk line, and then this chalk line to that chalk line there. And then I'm gonna cut them open with an X-Acto knife. I'm gonna be using the manual buttonhole foot, which is the C foot for a Viking machine. I'm sure your machine at home has a buttonhole foot, so make sure you check out your manual and find out how to create a buttonhole on your machine. Okay, so I've got everything lined up for my buttonhole, and now it's time to make it. And done. Now we have 1 more to do. And cut, and we're done with buttonholes. So we're just gonna use the X-Acto blade to push through the fabric and go right down the center of the buttonhole. Be careful you're not cutting through your buttonhole stitches. And now we have a slit in our buttonhole. I'm gonna open up my other buttonhole and then sew my buttons on. If you need help sewing a button, make sure you check out my video on that. The buttons are on and we have completely finished our skirt. So let's take a look at it. So our blazer is now a skirt. We have a beautiful finished waistband. We have that beautiful facing inside. We've added a few extra buttons and buttonholes. And I just love these pockets that are on the front. I think this is such a great, fun addition to keep on the skirt from being the coat. You'd never even know this was a coat before. And if we turn it around, you can see how it's nice and tailored to the body now. And voila, we have a skirt that used to be a jacket. Here it is. This is what it looks like on. And I just love these pockets in the front. They're so cool. I just love the fabric of the skirt. It is so fun. I love the texture. I love the plaid. I love that it's black with a bright color. It's got pink in it. You all know I love pink so much. So thrifting is so great because you can find awesome fabrics and it's so cheap. This jacket maybe cost me, I don't know, a few dollars, and then I turned it into this awesome skirt that I totally did not pay $300 for, but I totally would have if I went to the store and bought it. So upcycling is so awesome because you get really unique, one-of-a-kind pieces and it's inexpensive. If you have any questions about how to turn a blazer into a skirt, leave it down below and I will get back with you as soon as I can. And I would love to see your projects and upcycles, so make sure you tag me at Anastasia so that way I can repost them and share them with everyone else. I love keeping everyone creative and energized. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and give it some applause, and let me know what you think of this upcycle down below in the comments. And if you're not already a subscriber to Anastasia, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell so you know when all the new videos come out. I put out 2 videos every single week. So much fun sewing content. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok, and all those social media websites, make sure you find me and let's stay connected so we can stay creative together. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.